What's going on, my fellow rock and rollers? Now, we've always heard about bands who've resented their most successful songs, and I've kind of found it funny considering songs are probably like children to a lot of bands, but in the case of Cheap Trick, the group hated the biggest hit of their career, which was the power ballad The Flame. Now, the song was actually not even written by the band, but a pair of British songwriters named Bob Mitchell and Nick Graham, and the pair offered the song to English singer Elkie Brooks, who turned it down, and it was then offered to the band Cheap Trick. The song would appear on the group's 1988 record Lap of Luxury, and it would be the band's only song to hit the #1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100 charts in July of 1988. Now, Cheap Trick would hit superstardom almost 10 years prior in the United States, following the mammoth success of their live record Cheap Trick at the Budokan and their hugely successful follow-up Dream Police. Now, the 80s were poised to be a huge decade for the band, but they were marred by disappointing record sales and lineup changes, and it wasn't until 1988 that Cheap Trick seemed to turn things around with their new record Lap of Luxury, and their original bassist Tom Peterson, who left the group in the early part of the decade, finally returned to the lineup. Now, in addition to The Flame, the album featured 2 other top 40 hits, including a cover of the Elvis Presley song Don't Be Cruel, as well as the song Ghost Town. Now, apparently the band disliked the song when they first heard it. There was one story told where guitarist Rick Nielsen disliked the song to the point that when he first heard it, he removed it from the tape player and destroyed the cassette with his boot. Now, Cheap Trick drummer Bunny Carlos would tell an interviewer Tom Peterson rejoined in 1988, and then finally we've got the record down, and the record label said, "You still don't have a single." He'd go on to say the vice president at Epic Records told us that they had these 2 songs and they're both going to be #1 hits. He goes, "We got one for you and one for the group Chicago, but you can have the first choice." He said, "I think the one The Flame would be good for you guys. The other one was Look Away, and it sounded like some girl singing on the demo. We really didn't like that song anyways, so sure, we'll do The Flame. We're game," they'd say. Now, it would be ironic that given the song would go #1, it eventually worked against the band. Many of the bands who came up in the late 80s and early 90s would hold up Cheap Trick as one of their influences, and Cheap Trick would soon be branded as corporate sellouts since the song sounded like it was written to be radio-friendly, and it clashed with the group's image of being irreverent outliers. Bassist Tom Peterson would recall, "The timing was wrong. Right when that came out, grunge became popular, and so many of those grunge groups used us as an influence. They'd say, 'Oh, I used to love Cheap Trick, that early stuff. That got our goat.' It was so embarrassing. We're not like AC/DC, we're not just all heavy rock stuff. It's really diverse, straight-up pop songs, demented, scary songs about suicide and death metal. We're all over the place, and in that way it reminds me of the Beatles' White Album," he'd say. So that does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe. And as always, if you have suggestions for future topics, let me know in the comment section below. Take care.